very warm welcome to all our listeners to the next episode of the Equiverse Voices. Equiverse, a universe where gender equity is the norm. Here we delve into various pathways to build a more gender equitable world. In today's episode, we explore the profound impact of mentoring on women and supporting their careers. We delve into the ripple effect of mentoring and mentorship, examining why it is crucial for leaders, all leaders, and especially men, to invest in creating an equitable playing field by mentoring women. To enrich this conversation, we have today two very distinguished guests. We are honored to have with us Padma Shri awardee Saurabh Srivastava, one of India's leading entrepreneurs, investors, institutional builders. He has co-founded many institutions of modern India, including NASSCOM, India Venture Capital Association, TIE, India Angel Networks, and many more. More importantly, he has mentored hundreds of women, both in his corporate avatar as well as an entrepreneur and an investor. And we are fortunate to launch his first podcast episode. Welcome, Saurabh, to this conversation. In conversation with him is Archana Hingorani, co-founder and managing partner at Sienna Capital Investment Management. Archana is a globally recognized leader with extensive experience in fundraising, investing, and managing private investment over the last 3 decades. She has also been a beneficiary of being mentored in her career. She serves as a distinguished visiting faculty in the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome, Archana, to this conversation. Now let's dive into our discussion on the transformative power of mentoring and its impact on fostering gender equity. Over to you, Archana.
Sita, for that warm introduction, and of course, welcome, Saurabh. It's an absolute delight to host a conversation with you on this very important subject. Let me start with just quoting some statistics because I think there is well established data as well as personal experiences to tell us that women, even when they do get mentored, the percentage that do get mentored is much lower than the men. Despite that, there is hesitation as well as lack of leadership to actually allow this to happen so that women can advance. But you have taken a pole position on mentoring women throughout your lifetime. I shouldn't even call it a career because it's been so many years, and sprouted a few influential leaders. What motivates you to have taken this off beaten path?
Well, I think many things, Archana. Uh, and I would say one is the fact that I've recognized very early on in my career that actually women are smarter than men, but they don't let on easily. There are many factors that constrain it. And to my mind, I have felt that as far as mentoring is concerned, women are also more open to it and show much better results as a result of it than the same thing when I do with men. And because I've always had in companies that I've been involved in, a very large percentage of women, rarely below 33%. Uh, it's been always good to see how can I create a top management which has 50% women. And it's very clear that it's not going to happen on its own to do some mentoring. So my big driver has been that because women are more open to suggestions. Uh, they genuinely seek advice is not because they want to tick a box. Okay, you can see the results uh, in front of you, and women is not a level playing field. So there are many issues that women need to deal with that men don't. And if you're a man, you know, uh, you should be able to see some of them, then and probably have better answers for it. I've seen that. And when I was uh, in some ways growing up in my business career, mentoring was not that well established as a. It
Sure.
didn't have a term. You didn't have that. But you got mentored by people without their even
Correct.
telling you that they're mentoring you, or even without their knowing they were mentoring you. For instance, I ran a Tata company, and uh, there were a couple of times, for instance, when it was not one of the biggest Tata companies. This was in IT, but when uh, Mr. Ratan Tata wanted to meet up with me, there'd be a call from his office. But when I picked up the phone, the assistant wouldn't tell me that, fine, yeah, is this Saurabh Srivastava talking? Yes. Okay, let me get Mr. Tata. Mr. Tata used to be on the line. He
Sure.
didn't have to do it. I wasn't a big wheel in the group. It was Grace. With Mr. Anand Mahindra, it was even more. And so for example, in the Tata case, when a meeting finished, I wouldn't just get up and leave. He would walk me to the door. With Mr. Anand Mahindra, he'd not only walk you to the door, he'd go down the lift and go down to the street
Sure.
till my car came. Now, he didn't have to do it either, right? This is mentoring of a kind. It made me think of how I should be behaving with people. So you get this mentoring. Similarly, I was in the US, uh, and startups
Mm-hmm.
by Indians were rare. So people who've been successful would share some of their journeys. So you get mentored. But so I remember there are many. Just the fact that I remember the two examples I gave you after so long means they had an impact on I should behave in small ways. But but anyway, maybe that gives you some sense of why I think mentoring is so
Actually, when you
important.
said that mentoring was not labeled and probably it happened unintentionally, it was style, probably it was how they were trained, reminded me my first job at mentoring was with Mr. H.T. Parekh, who at least in my mind is uh, father of financial services, if I can call it that, because without him, I don't think we would have reached where we did. And his mentoring style was so unique that I actually felt that they were my own ideas, although they were his, right? He had this style of letting you figure it out, but also moving you in a manner that you didn't feel that you didn't know this. I actually, for the whole year, thought, I came up with all these things, and I was a chit of a 20-year-old. I obviously could not have come up with all these ideas on my own. And that just led to, a light touch mentoring attitude, which I have been able to adopt, going forward. So I do resonate with the fact that at least today strong labels allow you to talk about these topics more freely and more, I would say, more succinctly. But I'm sure that all of us have had some level of mentoring, male or female. But anyways, the topic here today is more about how to mentor women. So let me segue to the next question for you, which is that, which you already mentioned. I think you mentioned women are smarter. I think it would be probably on average right to say that we're as competent as men. In some cases, we may be smarter, but we can get the job done
At
as well
least,
as anybody else, right? And there is an interest.
at least, so
Sorry.
you might say at
Right,
least as
right.
competent as men.
Okay, agreed. Chalo, let's say it's at least. And there's an interesting study by, there's I think, a leadership firm called Zenger Folkman, who've said that women actually, to your point, scored higher than men in 12 of the 16 competencies that they, sort of studied over a period of time, including your point, taking the initiative and driving for results, which I think are two key characteristics that women do bring to the table, especially when they've worked hard to reach to a particular level. After that, I think it becomes natural for them to want to do all of these things. So if we know that this is how they can behave, why do we even have to rely on mentoring as a critical component for their careers? And why many leaders who are so busy and who are predominantly male, should they invest their time given all the pressures that they face? Is there a compelling thought, or are we saying that it's a nice to have?
Women being smarter or at least as competent. No, there are actually reasons why I said that. Uh, Firstly, as human beings, which men and women are, let's assume that it's every woman is the same or at least as good or bad as any man. So you're not starting with any disadvantage. The disadvantage comes as you grow up because we, societies tend to be patriarchal, certainly ours, but even globally. So women have a disadvantage because there's expectations from them are more difficult and more than they are of men. So they have constraints imposed on society by their families, by their children, by their spouses, whatever. Then there are fewer numbers of women in the workplace. So automatically they're a minority. So whether it's creating your own networks or all of those things again uh, create a problem. Then there are expectations. There's an expectation that woman would not be ambitious, right? So if you're not ambitious, then people will relegate you saying, look, not manager material, doesn't have leadership qualities. If you're ambitious, then you'll get a different epithet. And
Correct.
that'll be she's too aggressive, whatever. So there's no middle ground. One
Right.
wouldn't say that of men, right? But one will say that
I
of
guess
women, right?
men would be called
So they're
leaders
biased.
if they were to do that. Yeah.
Yes. So there would be issues, right? So and then women themselves, maybe because of the socializing, have higher expectations of themselves than do men. So they reflect more. Uh, I mean, they'll raise their hand only when they're very sure. A man will do it when they're half sure. So they hold themselves back as well. So in many ways, there are many reasons why women don't get their rightful place in organizations. Some are restrictions imposed on them externally, some that they impose on themselves internally. And mentoring is necessary because you want to unblock that. And you are quite right. Mentoring is not giving anybody a set of instructions because, then they're external. Unless I believe deep inside me that these are the right things for me to do, it's unlikely I will. And the best kind of mentoring is the one you got, which you didn't see them as anybody telling you. You thought
Correct.
they were your ideas. The best mentoring is about that. I mentioned a couple of cases in my thing which were accidental. Nobody was trying to mentor me. But it was the best thing because nobody was trying to tell me something. But I could see in their actions, hey, this is actually what I should do. This is, if I felt so good about this, then how will it make somebody else feel? Because when you see that grace, it isn't diminishing them, it's actually moving them to another level as far as I'm concerned, right? So it says to me, hey, I must remember that this is how I must do. Now it's me telling myself, Ratan Tata or Anand Mahindra didn't tell me, please do this. So it is the best way, but I think it is a reason why women do need to be mentored just to see how to unblock. these blocks. Some are external, for which you need to do more things than talking to the women. You also need to talk to the men. You need to look at your org structures. You need to see that things are not biased against them. But you do need to also mentor them to free themselves of their own biases, leave alone the biases that men have about them.
Yeah, no, you're right that there are certain social conditioning that has happened over the, I don't know, centuries. But do you think this is just a out of syllabus question for you? Uh, is it, at least my experience was that older and wiser individuals, male or female, made for better mentors. So is it something that comes to people once they understand, ways of life, or is it something that we can inculcate in the younger generation as a good hygiene habit so that everybody naturally thinks about mentoring?
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit about uh, age or experience, but it is actually more about uh, self confidence, right? So you can only help somebody cross the street if you think you are fully fit and able to hold that hand and take that person across the street, right? You can't do it if you're on a
Sure.
wheelchair yourself. So mentally, we need to make sure we're not on a wheelchair. I need to be comfortable about myself, with myself. I need to be self assured. So, unless I'm at that point, it's hard for me to mentor somebody else. I need to do enough mentoring of me, myself, right? And if I'm not at a good point in my own journey, actually my mentoring may not be correct either. So, yes, experience and age are two ways that allow you to live enough of a journey that you think you have enough to share, enough things you have to learn. There's no reason why it can't happen earlier. It just depends on what your journey has been. Because if you are not reached a point where you're comfortable with yourself and who you are, uh, you may or may not do the right kind of mentoring. But I think there's lots of young people I know, and remember when I say young, 40 or 50 is quite young, lots of people I know uh, who actually can be very good mentors,
Right.
have not thought about it. But to me, they've reached a point where they can. But you also need to find it important to do uh, because you have to find the time for
Correct.
it. And that realization comes when you realize that if you're in an organization and if you're a leader in an organization, then the best way for that organization to succeed is not by you doing more or you by you getting better at what you do, but actually by the rest of your organization rising several notches above where they are. And the best person to do that is you. So your time is better spent not in continuing to run the organization, but trying to see how you can get others to do it. And that's the time that you spend on mentoring. The day you realize that this is actually the most important business activity that you can do, then you will do mentoring. And then mentally also, you're at the right place, right time. So it's not about age as much as, you know, being in a certain
Sure.
place in your mind, in your mind.
So, yeah, sorry, go ahead,
And
please.
no, no, go ahead. And like I said earlier, uh, I just think it is far more important for people to make the time to mentor women more than they mentor men. Because see, men have a lot of their internal mentoring done through
Correct.
their own networks. Their friends, all of this happens. Cooler room talk, all kinds of stuff. Or, you know, catching a beer at the end of the day. Women don't have access to that. And it's a problem because if they start hanging around at the bar like the men, very often they'll get misunderstood. So they're hesitant, right? So that there are avenues
Sure.
that are not open to them, at least in India yet. So I think it makes more sense to do it.
So, why I think networking has been spoken a lot about, and maybe the Zoom era allows us to go past that a little bit. But I think there are key challenges that most women face and therefore need support of a mentor. Like if I think about myself, even today, I would say that one speaking up in public, uh, voicing your opinion, uh, is something that most women hesitate to do. I know I did in earlier phases of my career. You'd rather do the work and let the work shine and not really, get into the limelight, right? So that has been my personal, maybe it's my own attribute, personality. I'm sure partially it's because I'm female. But what do you think are the key challenges? I have identified one, but I'm sure there are many more that women face and they need support for.
I think there are many aspects that would come under mentoring. Some of it is the same for men or women, but some are very women specific. So the one area that women need mentoring is which is in their control is to exercise their own ghosts. Okay. So what do I mean by that? I'm saying, look, uh, women will not step up when a leadership position presents itself automatically. They would like to be invited. A man is happy to push himself into it, right? We are in a world today where leaning in is not good enough. You may have to barge in, right? And they need, to some extent, understand that when is it that they're ready? Because what their view of when they're ready is very different from when a man thinks they're ready. Okay. Uh, there are issues around how you handle networking, for instance, with for women. There are issues how you deal with colleagues. So there are a whole bunch of different issues which are women specific. Expectations from their families. How do you handle that? Guilt, you know, about family and business. So there are many areas where I think all you need is uh, kind of show a different lens to women, saying, look at the whole picture you're looking at, look at through this lens also. And then they can come and strive a balance. I mean, I'll tell you this, in my life, I talked about two mentorings, but when I was in school, in fourth and fifth and sixth standards, uh, I was uh, a good student. I was doing academically very well, but I was an introvert. And, uh, I had one teacher. I was in a Catholic school, and I still haven't forgotten Father Rego. He basically said to me, saying, "Look, why don't you come out and do these plays that we do, or concerts, or whatever?" And uh, I was very hesitant. And I said, "No, no, I don't think I'll be able to do it. I don't have the confidence." Okay. He continued to nudge me, continued to push me. And within 2 or 3 years, my biggest weaknesses actually became my biggest strengths. I won all the debating championships in the state, nationally and all the rest. When I was at IT, I was directing plays. Uh, I was doing the same thing when I went to the US. Uh, I became a great communicator. I was zero before that. If it hadn't been for him, I would be a very different person today. But he knew how to push me out of it or pull me out of it in many ways. So I know the difference that mentoring can make, both intended and unintentional. And I think the value for that is exceedingly high, and particularly so for women. I sort of think of myself as a woman when I was in fourth standard in St. Joseph's. That's how I behaved. And that changed with Father Ego. So I just think I mean, the thing with mentoring, of course, is you can do a lot of
Yeah.
it remotely. The problem with remote and Zoom is uh, it's easier to have transactional
Yes.
conversations than it is to have emotional or strategic conversations. Because when you're doing that, you're shooting the breeze a little bit. You need to pause, look out of the window. You might want to have a cup of coffee, laugh a bit before you get back. That doesn't happen because there's a Zoom call, it's 3 to 4. It's hard, much harder. So I think the limitations to the mentoring that you can do remotely, it's more instructional. It's hard to live it, right? Uh, because when you're having those discussions, you should be open for them to meander in any direction, depending on where it makes sense at the time. Very hard to do on a Zoom. So I think it helps, it's useful, but it's not enough. I think mentoring is still a very physical, sort of touchy feely thing, and so I just think that that's what makes more sense.
No, you're right. I mean, regardless of mentoring or otherwise, it's natural as humans that if you really want to get a point across and not have to go through it a few times till you get there, one tends to go back to basics and try and set up a in-person meeting so that you can enjoy the company, but more importantly, you can get not only work, any conversation done without subject to either iterations or misinterpretation. I think you're right about that when you are in person, it makes a huge difference. I mean, even I know that at work, forget the mentoring piece, if people are not in office and I really need something, I will try calling people once or twice, but then I'll end up doing it myself without getting inputs, which means that I don't have that ability to take everybody's ideas and make it a better one, right? So we miss out on all of that if we don't do.
See, it's a and Archana is a very simple thing after all. See, we talk about the Zoom and all the rest of it. Is saying, is it enough? Is it enough for our friends? I mean, with our friends, we can do a Zoom
Yeah.
call every
Yes.
weekend, but we don't.
Correct.
We want to meet because it's a lived experience. Human beings are created to interact physically. Our digital avatars will interact digitally, but we are created in a different way. But it does create some issues around women. I've had people ask me, saying, what with
Yeah.
this Me Too movement, uh, are men going to be more careful that they're not misunderstood and all the rest? Uh, quite honestly, I don't think that's a big issue. With me, we're all very smart people. Women are very smart or intelligent. They they will intuitively know when somebody is mentoring or when somebody is making a pass. And actually, uh, if somebody is genuinely mentoring, they're not going to be concerned about this at all because they know what they're doing. The woman who's being mentored knows what's happening. So honestly, I don't actually worry about it. But it isn't that uh, it's not as if there cannot be misunderstandings, but uh, I haven't faced it, and I know a lot of friends who have done that who haven't faced it because uh, if you're mentoring, then you need to be open, and and I think everybody, if you're real and genuine, and I don't think I wouldn't worry about it. And you can, and if you need to, you can always at an organizational level, maybe you can
Right.
create structure, you can create norms on what's appropriate or not appropriate to say or do. But if you make it too straitjacketed, then it will not be. Uh, it'll it may interfere with the quality of interaction.
So, I was just reflecting while you were talking about this, about Me Too, etc. I was thinking that many organizations today do talk about diversity, do acknowledge, some of them even have quotas, etc. Now, of course, this was not there, let's say, at least when I was starting out, or even in the maturity of my career, there were none of these labels, right? Which I, I'm trying to figure out if that was better or is this better. Only reason I'm saying that is that I know that in a defined world of today, many women, while being either mentored or identified as doing well and therefore advancing in their careers, face reverse criticism from their male colleagues, right? Which is that they picked you because they need to fulfill a quota, ignoring the fact that you actually were the right person for it. So just some thoughts on how one would expect women to deal with you know because at one level many of them probably feel that there is a point of arrival and everybody recognizes that we contribute as much, but while the people who have identified you as a good worker or as a good potential leader, you also your colleagues and your peers don't view you like that, only because they feel that it must have happened only because you're female. How does one deal with that?
I think the best way is to shrug it off, okay? Because uh, it's because you were a woman that you didn't get the jobs that you should have got. So, supposing you did get one because you're a woman, big deal. There's two jobs you lost because you were a woman, and one that you got because you were a woman. I would just shrug it off because the reality is, in today's world, you're not going to get a job that you can't deliver on.
Sure.
Nobody's going to, they may give you an opportunity, but nobody's going to keep you there if you don't deliver. Doesn't happen, right? So, in organizations, you talked about Deepak Parekh, I would say also Kamath. I mean, you can see organizations where women have bloomed and done brilliantly, better than most men in most financial service organizations, only because that organization had a culture of giving women an equal opportunity. And for a while, if we give a slightly disproportionately number of opportunities, that's fine. What's wrong with that? I mean, after all, many of us were campaigning for women
Yes.
on corporate boards, right? And when the government came out with a mandatory requirement, I remember somebody remarking saying, look, uh, the so all this will do is the the business guys will put their daughter or daughter-in-law sister on the board. And my thing to that was, okay, so today they were putting their son or niece on or nephew on the board, so they'll put the niece. What's wrong with that? You didn't complain when the male relatives got on, why are you complaining when women? At least is one step. The second is to say, okay, one independent director needs to be a woman. So I would say, uh, don't don't feel apologetic. Don't get sensitive about it. It's your right. You've been denied that for a long time. Now you're getting it. It's okay. No problem. Because eventually you'll
Sure.
be there only if you perform. And if you do, whoever was sniggering will stop sniggering. It's a question of time.
Yeah. No, easier said than done, especially if you have to meet those colleagues every day and they think that of you. I know you have to put it in some corner, but
No, but see the different way. This also happens with men, right? Many men get ahead into favored positions because they are being, how should let me say it nicely, excessively kind to their boss, right? Agreeing with what they say, whatever it is, pampering their egos. So they get it. They get it because of that, right? Now they have to face all the rest of this stuff when they are in that position. And if they don't perform, then they will also find the door. So I know it's tough, but the best way to my mind is shrug it off. Assume it was your right. Assume you should
yes,
believe you deserved it. If somebody else does not believe you deserved it, it's not your problem. The only action that you can take is to make sure that you prove that you deserved it. There's nothing you can do about what 10 men feel, and I wouldn't waste
okay,
time over it. You should never waste time on things that are not in your control. It's
right.
not in your control what men feel. It is in your control what you do with that opportunity. I would just focus on that.
Sure. So I'm going to take your advice and not waste any more time on that topic. I'm going to move to something that all of us have conversed about a lot, that one of the very good positive impacts of mentoring over the years, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is that it does create a ripple effect, and it benefits across organizations, be it from the different studies, something on profitability, something on long term stickiness of employees, something on ensuring supply chains are maintained seamlessly, all of that attributed to the fact that you have these kind of possibilities for women within organizations. You want to share with us some stories about your experiences of this ripple effect?
I think it's very powerful because when people get rid of their own constraints, many of them self imposed, and because somebody's made them aware of it, that's what mentoring is about. Mentoring is not about saying, let me tell you what you need to do. Mentoring is about, as you yourself explained best, is l- getting you to see your own potential, getting you to get the confidence to do, what you can and what you should do. So when people realize how much impact it's made on them, you automatically want to do the same. And so women who are successful and who realize they've been successful because they got the right kind of mentoring, they would want to do the same. Men would like to do the same. If they have been mentored, they will mentor. If they've never been mentored in their life, they may never mentor. Okay. So I think it's because when we've been mentored and we recognize the impact it's made, we know the difference we can make. So it comes more naturally. So the ripple effect is huge. With women, the ripple effect, to my mind, is much stronger than with men. A, because they need more mentoring than men in a world that's dominated by men in the business place. Uh, they are not getting their due share, fair share of what they should get. And some of those constraints are not even external, they are those that they impose on themselves. So when they realize, and it opens up their whole uh, vision, it's inevitable they would try and mentor others to do the same thing. So to my mind, uh, it's very, very powerful. I have seen it work, certainly in the organizations that I've been involved in. Uh, Almost all of them, without exception, have had women leaders at the top. And I think they've all done well because of the reason that they've had women at the top. And inevitably, when there's been a woman leader at the top, she's ensured that at least half of the top management are women. And, and so the ripple effect is huge, absolutely huge. Uh, and that's why I think this is so powerful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was reflecting on if I was to think about how many women in my organization the places I worked at went on, I can at least think of good 4 or 5 who are in leadership positions today. And I think it was not because they were too junior for me to be for them to be directly talking to me every day, but they had an ecosystem in which they got nurtured by both men and women to reach where they are. So you're right in that sense, it does make a huge impact. Is there a role for organizations to create a better mentoring type of situation, or not even situation, I would say that maybe a more well refined framework that encourages mentoring to be taken full advantage of by women?
Well, let's put aside the men and women for a minute. The There's a huge role to make this happen. Let me give you a great example. So Microsoft is a very good example. It was run by Bill Gates. It was done in a very different way, and it was a very autocratic, top-down method of running Microsoft post Bill Gates. And Microsoft stock did very poorly. Then came Satya, and his style was completely different. It was collaborative, it was teamwork. And Microsoft stock has soared. So in the old style, the encouragement was for cutthroat, move ahead style of management. In the second style, what was rewarded was collaboration and teamwork. Performance changed completely. So, uh, to my mind, it makes a huge difference what you create as organization culture. And you can create organization culture based on how you create the organization structures and how you also create reward mechanisms. People are smart. They know what it takes to succeed. If what it takes to succeed is for me to kill
Sure.
everybody else, I'll do that. And if what it takes me to succeed is to work with everybody else, I'll do that. Then if I don't fit in, I'll go somewhere else. That's what an organization culture does. Those who don't fit in leave. So I think organizations can make all the difference in how they choose to create their structures, their cultures, and what is rewarded and what is not. That's the best way to encourage the behaviors that you want.
No, you're right. And I was just reflecting that at least a large part of my career was in organizations that had, let me call it, sandwich structure, which was men leading women, women in turn leading men, and so on and so forth. And that really allows people to thrive beyond gender barriers, because it seems normal that everybody is doing that. And I know that there is a huge gap when people try and find women for particular roles. And it's essentially been because they've been siphoned off at early stages, so clearly there's a gap, right? And even when you try, many of them do try to hire on a policy which says that show me as many women candidates. Only if you can't find anybody, get me a male candidate. you still you're still searching, right? So but I think in order to foster more and more women within organizations and making it normal, not like this is quota so she's there, or am I the only person in this room who's of a particular gender? Or we've had situations, for example, at talentnomics, where we've made fun of men who come into the room because there are 10 women and there's only one guy, right? All of us want to move away from those kind of thought patterns. And I think you're right, an organization, its structure and the way it functions does lend itself to uh, a better, let's say over time, a better gender neutral kind of a format, which people without hesitation can think about moving on, advancing in their careers, and not have these side, I know side pockets always exist for some conversation about a not performing or B being better or whatever. But I think it probably levels the field a whole lot better if an organization consciously adopts uh, a policy that allows for better involvement of women. Your thought?
Yeah, I think, Archana, if an organization structure, organization values, reward mechanisms, if they are tailored in a way which play to the strengths of women, then automatically behaviors will shift in the right direction. Because the solution to this whole divide is not that women should feel that to succeed, they have to become like men. That would be very unfortunate. Because what you want is for more men to bring to the table the virtues that many women bring, right? So, uh, the ability to collaborate, multitask, operate in teamwork, uh, have manageable egos. I mean, all of these are huge attributes uh, for success in today's environment and going forward, because organizational structures are going to be flat, right? So, all of these are huge virtues today. Women have them in a more plentiful measure than do men. So you really want organization culture to shift to playing to women's strengths for the good of the organization, not so much just for women. But if you build that, it'll get men to also pick up the right culture and values, and it would not put pressure on women to be more like men. And and I would just say this, that I think all women should remember that actually they need to play to their strengths, not to somebody else's strengths.
But
So, so I mean, if you're a good spin bowler, you don't try to
correct.
do pace bowling. Stay with what you're good at.
You bring a very interesting point. I was thinking that you said people should recognize that you have to allow women to play to their strengths. But I wonder why one needs to point that out, because I think in any organization doesn't normally people think like that, right? Even, I mean, forget male, female. They will say, this person is good at this piece. I think we should nurture him for this role. Or, this guy is more of an extrovert. He needs to be in a front facing position. We always have these conversations, but when it comes to, like, you're suggesting something that one is normally doing for all individuals, but I'm intrigued, and I think it's true what you're saying, that people do tend to make women try and fit into roles when they have certain strengths which can naturally become they.
I only say this. See, I only say this because for men, people judge each
Hmm.
individual person. When women, when it's women, they first apply a, a broad uh, sort of swipe, a broad agenda, saying, okay, she's a woman, so hey, we should consider her for these roles. So in the first place, you've knocked out
Yes.
a whole bunch of roles. And then you say, okay, now let's figure out. And I'm saying, look, let's flip it. Uh, you're saying that woman can't do this because this requires for somebody to be very ambitious, outgoing, communicative, uh, maybe be a bit aggressive. So this is for a man, this is not for a woman. I'm saying
Yeah.
don't make that judgment call. In fact, ask yourself, is that a good set of behavioral patterns that you want for the organization? Maybe you don't. You only want people who will be collaborative. I mean, we're defining leaders the wrong way. So it's not that the most aggressive, in your face people
Yeah.
are the best leaders. Okay, there may be situations and companies where that may work for a while, but that is not what works in the long term. In looking at the way organizations are going today, teamwork and collaboration
Absolutely.
is fundamental. So I'm just saying, relook at the values and what's good, what's not good, whatever. Redefine your organization values, culture, structures, and make them more suited to how women are. Not because you were trying to help women, but you're trying to help the organization. But in that structure, because it plays to the strengths of women, more women will automatically fit in. That's I'm saying that in a different way.
So I think we've covered a very broad spectrum of topics. Of course, mentoring being the key subject here today. Uh, any other last minute advice, thoughts that we could share with the audience?
The winds of change are actually blowing in the right direction. And you know, like in that movie, which
Hmm?
was Apna Time Aayega, uh, I think this is where it's happening for women. And I would say that to some extent, my views are shaped by my own experiences. When I went to the US in 68, in those days in the early 70s, the people like us who had good degrees and came from good education backgrounds were less common because US visa policies had been recently changed. So
Right.
most of us did well, but we rose to be vice presidents and maybe the occasional CEO and vice presidents of technology, not business development or sales, because we were
Right.
typecast. India was a loser country. Uh, we weren't doing very well. We had old business houses. We were not entrepreneurial. So we were cast in a certain way. And if we wanted to do a startup, there was no VC who was willing to write us a check. They said, hey,
Right.
there's no precedent. You know, you guys are not entrepreneurial in India. How do we know you don't have a network here? Right? We haven't seen leadership capabilities. They wouldn't write us a check. So I wasn't a woman, but believe you me, all of us who were there at that time were living through what women must
Correct.
live through every day. We were in a minority, right? And we had to work twice as hard to be as successful as somebody local. But we built our brand slowly. We got to be known. Today, if you want venture capital funding and you don't have an Indian founder, you will be asked questions. How come? Because a third of
Right.
startups in the valley have an Indian founder. So it took time. Now we are the flavor of the day. To me, I see this situation of women as very similar. We were good, we were better than anybody there, but we didn't think so ourselves initially. We had self doubts. Uh, Everybody else has doubts, but simply by being there, doing well, it changed. This same thing's going to happen with women. There's no question. But anything we can do to accelerate that would help. I mean, in America, with all the Indians being there, eventually, by their getting space and doing their thing well, has been good for America. Indians account for 6% of, contribute to 6% of American GDP. It's good for. Similarly, if we allow our women to bloom, you know, we'll add 2 points
Sure.
to the GDP
Yeah.
for sure.
You're right. Apna time Aega can be used both for India and women simultaneously. And it's interesting you're saying that only because I feel that this women being categorized is not an Indian phenomenon only, right? I mean, there are
No,
even
no, not
till
at all.
I would say my experiences are much later living in the US than yours in the 90s, but the level of discrimination, open discrimination, was very very evident, and I think it's there still today in many areas. I mean, they
No, no, of course, the best thing that typifies it is that every country in South Asia has had a woman as a leader, as the country's prime
correct.
minister or president. That's happened in Israel, that's happened in the UK, it's happened in Germany. The Americans are still asking if they are ready for a female
True,
president.
true.
So,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
that's
just
what I meant.
India
That
alone.
we have a better. I think you're right. It's like right right combination of circumstances as well as environment, which is a growing India and a growing influence of women. I think we probably uh, have the capacity to leapfrog much faster than, let's say, other.
And in many areas, see, and in many areas we are. If you look at a civil service,
Yes,
high percentage of women. When I was in the US, if a woman said she was working in a hospital, it was
nurse,
assumed
correct.
she was a nurse. You
Right.
would not assume that in India. So I'm saying, it's not an area where we have to necessarily follow. We can lead.
Yes, I think we have enough confidence as a country and as women to start doing that better now than never. But I think this is a great conversation, Saurabh. Thank you for taking the time. And to our listeners out there, I hope this inspires you to either think of uh, mentoring people or getting mentored, and being successful as women leaders. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Saurav and Archana, for joining us in this podcast conversation. It was absolutely exciting to listen to both of you and learn about the impact mentoring can have on women. I want to thank all the audience for joining us in today's episode of the Equiverse Voices. As always, our speakers have shown us various paths towards shaping the Equiverse. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on gender equity in our upcoming episodes. Let's take actions as individuals, as professionals, as family members towards building an Equiverse where every person, regardless of gender, can thrive and succeed. Do collaborate with us to build this new world. We would love to hear from you, your suggestions, your ideas, and reactions to these conversations. Thank you again.